we have been battling for years getting anybody to understand exactly what we do. You know, people think magically that there is a little genie that somebody boinks their head down and magically there's a sterile set that comes with 0 defects. That's not reality.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
Clean freaks, you're listening to Beyond Clean, episode 2 in our season 24, The Papers That Make Us Awesome. And today we're going to be speaking to Beth Rayfield, Director of Sterile Processing and Central Supply at IU Health, on the topic of job descriptions. How do we describe the awesome, amazing, terrific things that we do every single day in sterile processing, saving lives and saving patients from infection and harm? How do we describe that quickly and effectively in recruiting and in advertising all of our roles in all the ways that we do to get the right people on the bus in the right seats? We're going to have that conversation in just a moment with Beth Rayfield. So hang out. We'll be right back after this short break.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
All right, Clean Freaks, we are in the studio today with Beth Rayfield, the Director of Sterile Processing and Central Supply at IU Health. So, Beth, you've been around the Beyond Clean network for a while now. You know, folks may have seen or heard from you before on some of our events, but this is your first time in podcast studio today with us. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Always wanted to be on the podcast. So you just made my dream come true.
Well, you know, you said yes to us, so you made our dream come true too, Beth. But yeah, it's been great the last couple of years. You've also been a member of the Beyond Clean Advisory Group. I think you were one of our very first members, actually, as we were putting that group together. So it's been a crazy ride. We've gotten a lot of things done so far, but we've got a lot of big plans for that group too. So it's an exciting time to be in sterile processing and to be creatively doing things just like this podcast with Beyond Clean. So really appreciate your commitment.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So the topic at hand today is sterile processing job description. So this episode is in the broader season of the papers that make us awesome. And we're talking all things documentation. So we've had episodes talking about onboarding and orientation. We're going to be talking about general department documentation. We're going to be talking competencies. But you're in front of us today talking about sterile processing job descriptions. And this is one of those pieces of paper that if you're coming into the industry, it's the very first thing you see about SPD. It's just telling the story, for better, for worse, about what it is you should expect when you walk into this department. And so we're going to spend a couple of minutes here really diving into that. And the place I want to start is the who. Who writes these things, Beth? And also, as you answer that, who should write them if we got the wrong people writing them today?
Great question, Hank. You know, job descriptions are such a fun thing to talk about. Just kidding.
Hey, I'm sitting over here shaking my head like, yeah.
It's all the fluff, but none of the meat and potatoes is the way I look at it.
Right.
So, yeah, are the right people writing them? No. Who writes them? Typically, your human resources department writes them. Are they the right person to write them? I'm going to answer that question honestly and say no, but they need to be a collaborator, because many of us leaders or sterile processing central supply team members, we don't have a course on how to write a job description. And I will honestly tell you, when I became manager, that was one of the first things they said, we're going to rewrite the job descriptions. And I was like, I don't know all the legal ramifications regarding all of this. So, it needs to be a partnership, but they don't know what we do. They put the basic, must be able to push, pull, bend, squat, step. They don't say must be able to handle stress at a level that you've never expected before, So there are key words and things like that need to be included in it. And that's where the HR business partner can come into play to help say, well, maybe we can fluff this and put it a little bit there. But we also need to be able to be honest and truthful with these people, because people who are applying for a sterile processing technician job, 99% of them do not even know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. You brought up a terrific point there, though, of when leaders get into the leadership for the first time, the vast majority of us have never written a job description before. We've never been shown how to write a job description. And it's an art. It's a language art, if you will, to how to creatively and correctly communicate what the complexity of this job is, what the expectations are, to your point, and to do that in a way that still makes the job seem like, if you don't know what the job is, you may still be interested and want to apply. But your other point's also well taken. We've got to be truthful. Because how many times have we taken people on tours, maybe like in the middle of their job interview or right after their job interview, and we're like, hey, you want to see the department? We take them around and their eyes get bigger and bigger and bigger the closer we get to decontam.
Yes. Oh, yes. Or they say, show me where you wash all the dishes.
Right. Yeah.
And I know automatically then that they have not done their homework to even seek out and destroy, to find out what it is that the job entails. I've been doing this work for 22 years. 22 years ago, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have, this sounds really bad, but we didn't have, all of the iPhones and the, different YouTube to go and look at all of these things. You had to go and research out. You may have to go to the library. Yes, the library.
With the card catalog.
May take you a few days to find the job that, the words that you want to use in your job description. But no, I'm just saying that, we have come such a far way, but there are some things that are still, lagging behind. And that's our job now today, to let people know what it is. What are you getting yourself into? Because we're putting a large investment once we've hired these people. And I know that you've got the experience that I do. How many times have you gotten somebody and they're like, you've hired them, they've gone through orientation and now you're looking and they're like, I had no idea I was going to work this hard. This is not what I thought I was signing up for.
Yeah, I think there's an assumption, especially if you're not coming from any kind of healthcare background, that working in a hospital is like this clean, sterile environment where you'll never get dirty, you'll never be exposed to anything that's
never gonna see blood.
Yeah, bodily fluids. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is definitely not the case for most of healthcare, but definitely sterile processing. Like, our job is to confront all of those bodily fluids and all of the pathogens, that are present every single day that we confront. So, being honest, to your point, and strategically collaborating. The other point that you made about the HR resources, even though these professionals don't know what we do, they every single day are writing job descriptions, and they know how many of these applicants respond to certain keywords and, certain structures of these job descriptions. And so coming together and kind of filling in the gaps where they're not competent in the specifics of our role, but then letting them, help us, especially if we've never written job descriptions before. That's a really powerful combination that doesn't get enough airtime. Like, we talk all the time about collaborating with IP and collaborating with OR customers, but who's out there talking about collaborating with your HR business partner? Not too many.
And I will share with you one thing that we have done within our organization is now our HR business partners, they actually come and shadow a day in sterile processing. so that they can see, because they're the ones that are having that conversation with the applicant. Once we've said, yeah, I'd like to hire this person, they're the ones that are talking to them. So when they're asking, the HR business partner questions, they now are able to at least understand what the work is. To know, when they say, well, will I have to buy my own scrubs? Oh, no. Scrubs are provided for you. Those kind of things. Because in the past, they didn't know. I mean, there was a lot of back and forth between, once you extended the offer, then they're, okay, well, the employee's got a question about this and I don't know anything about what you do, So now they're learning that in order for them to be a better partner with us, they have to understand what it is we do. Obviously, in nursing, they can't go into the nursing area and, job shadow, but they can still at least see what the daily, tasks at hand may be for that area.
I think that's a terrific idea. And again, it goes back to we've talked a lot about having surgeons come and shadow. We've talked about operating room nurses come and shadow. We haven't talked a lot about getting your HR business partner down there. It's such a great experience, though, to your point, for them on the front end, but also they're the person, not that this interview is about this, but our HR business partner is also the one on the back end if we have problems with staff and there's breakdowns and there's issues. The more they know about the stress that they're confronting and the expectations of this job, just the better partner they're going to be all the way around. So I love that practical takeaway. That's one of the things I'm like, okay, great advice, man. Already. We're just getting started.
Everyone should do it. All the cool kids are.
Yeah, that's great.
And some places don't have that opportunity, but they can still, like we talked about, they can still have a partnership with the HR person or someone who represents them with the new hires onboarding. At least there's somebody there that they can talk to.
Right. Yeah. So we talked about the who a little bit. Now I want to talk about the why. Could have started with the why, but I like starting with the who on these interviews a little bit more. So why are these job descriptions important to what we're wanting to accomplish in SPD and getting the right people on the bus in the right seat?
Well, the why behind all of it is that in order for me to have those quality driven individuals, they have to understand the whole part of what the job is. So as a leader, I'm using these guidelines, as I call them, because I think really a job description is just a guideline of what the job is, but it's also an accountability factor as well. I have to be able to hold these people accountable because I give an example a lot of times to my staff when they say, well, it's just so busy here. I didn't realize it was going to be so busy. And, sometimes I just need to take a break. And I, explain to them, so you hire a babysitter to watch your children. Do you want your babysitter taking a break when you're paying them by the hour? So you have to kind of put it into perspective for people too sometimes because, I've got this 15-minute break I can use whenever I want. That's great. However, this is how it goes. You kind of have to guide them. And that's what the job description is. It's really a guide to help them learn about, here's the expectations. Here's what we're going to provide for you. And here's your portion that you have to own. So as we use those, and a lot of different places have what we call a stair-step ladder, where they have a tech 1, tech 2, tech 3, team lead, supervisor, what have you. Well, those job descriptions, they also put in there, this is what you have to have. This is the skills that you have to be able to start with us. And these are the skills, these are the like to haves, and they'd be great if you have them, but we don't require them. And then here's what we're going to offer you in order for you to have this whole package put together.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting insight on that piece, the like to have and the need to have structure. I don't see that as being quite standardized across the industry today. And so it's kind of dependent on, are you applying for a job at a particular hospital in Georgia or one in California, on what they're going to tell you that you have to have versus the exact same job and role in a different state or different facility could have a different must-have requirement that now you have to navigate around. Why do you feel like we're in that situation as an industry? Why are those things different?
Well, so you've got different states that have different laws. there are some states that they are unionized. So you've got that to deal with as well. There could be things like emissions and things like that for California where, luckily I'm not involved in any of those states, but there may be local and state requirements. And then there are some places too. So there are some states that have mandated certification as a part of employment. They may give you 1 year, 2 year, what have you. But then there are some states that, oh, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to mandate. So there are some things that you have to look for at a state level, at a local level. And then also you've got some people there are people who are put in these positions that have passion and desire, and, they want to see this profession grow. There are others that are in this, they've kind of stumbled across the profession. This isn't their landing ground. This is a temporary spot for them. So they may not put as much passion and fire in, their job descriptions, and they may not have been trained either. They may not have the education. And I don't mean formal education as in you don't have to have a college degree to write a job description, but you do have to have some sense of business writing because there are laws, so you have to make sure that you're within those.
Yeah, what you also mentioned something else I wanted to call out earlier. This is at your beginning when you're talking about the kind of candidate that you're wanting to recruit in sterile processing, and you use the word quality oriented, I think was one of, as well as you didn't say this word, but the allusions that you're given to was you need a team player. And just using those words in a job description doesn't necessarily ensure that communication is coming across to the individual or, going back to the HR business partner or the recruiter. It's difficult to judge by a resume, and it's difficult to judge even sometimes by interview questions where this person stands on that point of quality or, team player. Now, thankfully there's a lot of creative things and tests they can take, and then you can ask them specific kind of activity-based questions, I think, in the interview to get at more of those. Yeah, behavioral, that's the word I was looking for.
I knew.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the new fad.
Right. But, it goes beyond the technical, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, because you're looking for an individual with a commitment to something outside of themselves, that quality, that standard of excellence. And yeah, effectively communicating that in a job description very clearly that this is not an option. We can't and we don't want to hire people that don't care about quality, because otherwise this is not going to go well for you or for the patients.
Exactly.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. There are strategic words that need to be used. And sometimes people will ask during the interview, they're like, I wasn't quite sure what this meant on the job description. Could you explain this? And that's when I was like, wow, you read the job description.
That's right. That's right. A+ on that.
Yeah.
That one.
Because we all know, Hank, we've been in this business enough to know that a big portion of our applicants come from word of mouth. Hey, my sister has a friend that works in sterile processing, and they thought that I would really be a good fit because I have a really good attention to detail. Talk to me more about that, so little things like that, attention to detail, able to, handle constructive criticism. That's not really the way you want to put it, but there are verbiage that HR can help you with to, to state that out there, because people need to understand that, again, we have been battling for years getting anybody to understand exactly what we do. People think magically that there is a little genie that somebody boinks their head down and magically there's a sterile set that comes with 0 defects. That's not reality.
Yeah, this whole job description conversation, you brought up the kind of pipeline or that word of mouth that happens, because then you end up like you got your current staff. Well, they've all got friends and family or associates. So then typically what they do or what they don't do is they don't print out the job description, go take this, to their cousin and say, here's the job. What they do is they tell them about the job. What's really interesting, would be an interesting kind of thought experiment, is to sit down with your employees and say, so when you describe this job to your friends and family, how do you describe it? And then let's look at our job description and see what lines up and what may not line up with that. And, we may get some surprises, because if they're leaving out important details, back to the quality and the teamwork piece, if that's not on their talk track, then that organic word of mouth pipeline could be bringing the kind of candidates that we actually don't want in our department because they don't align there. So,
and you're right too, because it also depends on their leader. If they like their leader, then they may be giving a really good, real time, accurate account of what the job is. If they don't like their boss, and I'm sure you've been in interviews too, where you're interviewing someone and they're bad mouthing their current leader, and you have to really kind of read between the lines on some of that, because sometimes it's a quality issue that they've had that's not being addressed. And they are so quality focused that their values don't align with, their current employer's values. So sometimes, you have to ask more questions to seek to understand, to find out what is the pain point that they have. Because you definitely, I've hired people that have had interviews that, some people would feel like, well, I don't want to hire them because they just badmouth their boss. But when you drill down and ask the questions, you're finding out that, it's the fact that they're not doing proper practices, which therefore make that person feel like they're breaking the law,
Yeah, there's a meme that goes around every so often, and it's something like, there's no such thing as bad bosses, or just like toxic workplaces or something. And I kind of counter that and I push back and say, no, there are such things as just bad bosses sometimes who are, not leading in accordance with their own mission, vision, values in the department. They're not being fair. They're not holding people accountable. There's a million things that can happen to that. But yeah, your point's well taken. At the same time that we should be concerned about the job description communicating what they would be walking into, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the applicant too, to know where they're coming from and what dynamic are they leaving. Is it a good dynamic where they trusted the boss and they felt like everything was clear, or was it a bad dynamic, like the one you're describing? And I want to go back though to something that we touched on before, and I'm just going to kind of come out and ask you. So there's different standards around the industry on what's required and not required when you apply for this role, but there's also just different names and titles for what it is that we're doing. So where do you sit and how do you navigate all the different names and nomenclature out there for sterile processing? And what impact does that have on what we're trying to do here, which is recruit the next generation?
Right. With the job description, it's kind of hard because there are, like you said, there's slang terms out there, right off the bat, my name tag has central supply and sterile processing. And some of that comes from, within organizations, they try to, so our central supply came out as these were the for-profit entities versus the non-for-profit. So sterile processing was in the hospitals, but the outpatient surgery centers were the central supply, because they kind of morphed those together with the supply side of things. Even the people within the hospital struggle sometimes. It's like, where do I go to? Because you hear central supply, you think that's the central place where you go for all your supplies, not to go get your instruments. So there's some education that has to go around with that. Usually I just go with we're the people that process your instruments. We're the ones that magically bring you the sterile instrument set that's ready for you to use. That's who we are.
It's the same thing, with the instrument names, right?
Yes.
If you've got operating room nurses coming from different parts of the country, or even like different hospitals within your territory,
give me the mother-in-law claim.
They're bringing their slang with them, and it causes all kinds of irritation and frustration sometimes.
And there's a lot of education sometimes that has to go around that stuff, because here you've got your techs that you're teaching, you've got your experienced techs, and they feel like, oh, you cheated me, you didn't train me on this word. They're all calling for this, and I didn't know this. But again, that's where I try to also make sure that our job description, that we state that this is something you're going to grow in. So there's the growth potential, and that's why for IU Health we decided that we were going to take all of our sterile processing technicians and create 3 basic job roles. The entry level is Tech 1. You get certified, you become a Tech 2. Job description changes, but we still incorporate what was the basic job description for the Tech 1, is that it states, all of the same requirements are required from Tech 1. Now here's the additional responsibilities. And we go through that when we promote them too, because I have folks that are like, well, I'm going to get another certification and get, jump up to a Tech 3. I'm like, well, but remember, a Tech 3 requires you to be a preceptor, and you've only been in this role for 6 months. And so you need to be in your job for at least a year before I'll look at you and say, yes, now you're ready to precept others who have no experience. Now, there are people that jump outside of that box. You've got high performers that come that, are very in touch with they just pick up very well, and they
natural educators. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So those people, you can see that and you explain that to them. But I always pull out the job description because I want the techs to see with that pay increase also comes additional responsibilities.
So, Beth, our time here flew by, as they always do on these podcasts, but I do have one last question, just kind of on that practical side that you're just giving us. And I feel like we've got a lot of takeaways from this short conversation even. But, you just brought up when you have these promotional conversations, you're bringing them back to the job description, right? It's not just, hey, like you're getting more money and now you get a new title. It's also let's talk about what your core job description is and what is maybe changing about, this additional role now that you're taking on. In your experience as a leader, when and how often should you be reviewing that job description with employees? Is this something that just happens when you get a promotion? Is it something that you should maybe be looking at on an annual basis? Do you talk about job descriptions even outside of individuals? Is that something that would come up in staff meetings, or maybe like when you're interviewing other staff and your peer interviews? Kind of talk us through that here.
Yes to all of the above.
Okay.
And I start that conversation during the interview portion. I let them know, we have opportunities for advancement, but with any advancement comes additional responsibilities. So if you're money driven, that's fine, but you need to understand that additional money brings on additional responsibilities. And those responsibilities you have to be a novice at. You can't just be an entry level because people are looking to you to guide them. When you've got a brand new instrument technician out there and they're off their orientation, just because they've, checked the boxes and passed the tests and performed the duties, as an orientee doesn't mean that they're ready to go on their own and that they are self-sufficient. So we have to be very, very cautious about that because that's that sensitive time where they feel like they're belonging, but they're not quite sure that they're supported. And in order for them to really cross that bridge and feel like I'm a part of this group, they have to be able to have that knowledge because that's the confidence that's going to keep them going.
It's really the concrete example of this career ladder that we talk about out there kind of abstractly, but the career ladder is really all of our job descriptions in the way that you step them up, from entry level all the way through, in the ways you're describing. So I think that's important for folks to keep in mind when they're thinking career ladder, because you're right. Some people think that just means more money, or maybe that just means more time and I'm just automatically going to float to the top. But if that's not how your job descriptions are structured, then that's not how your career ladder is structured either. So it's really, really important. If anyone's listening to this and you're one of those high performers that Beth's talking about who wants to grow, well, don't just think that you coming in and working real hard is automatically going to lead to growth. You need to be looking at those job descriptions and say, what does this description say that I need to have at each stage of growth? And then be working toward that. So great insight here, Beth. I really appreciate you sharing a couple of minutes with us today, but years and years of experience on these kind of topics, because there's a lot of new leaders out there too that are probably sitting there saying, I've never written one of these before. Where do I start? So great job.
Thank you. I really feel like that's our job. We should be mentoring our newcomers and everything, because like I tell my staff, eventually you're going to have my job one day. I am going to leave and retire. I need to make sure that your toolbox is full. That's what that's how we make this profession as wonderful as it is. So thank you for the opportunity, Hank. I really appreciate this.
All right, that was Beth Rayfield, Director of Sterile Processing and Central Supply at IU Health. Great conversation today on a very deep subject. We don't think a lot about about job descriptions, I think, unless it's when it's talking about things I don't want to do. Those other duties as assigned is one of the favorite HR phrases to put in job descriptions, which basically just kind of covers anything that your boss might ask you to do in or across the department. And, there's upsides to that, right? We don't want to be so specific in our job descriptions that then we can't have anyone answer the door when someone knocks on the door or answer the phone when the phone rings because it doesn't say in my job description that I have to answer the phone. So we need to be broad enough and just reasonable enough on the technician side to know there's going to be things that we're asked to do that's not in our job description or clearly spelled out in our job description. But at the same time, on the leadership and the HR side, we do want to be intentional about telling the truth in our job descriptions. And that's something that Beth brought up early on in this interview, that it's in our best interest as an industry and a department to clearly communicate what we mean by sterile processing and what each one of these specific roles that we may be recruiting for is requiring. And if we just let HR do that without any insight or direction or feedback from true clinicians who have done the job before, we can end up with some really unhelpful and unclear job descriptions, which ultimately is probably going to get us the wrong people in our application pool. And the final takeaway, though, that I wanted to turn back to was something that Beth said kind of toward the end of this conversation. And it's that word of mouth. And remember, I brought up, hey, it would be interesting to know how your team describes the job to their friends and family who may be interested in applying, and then comparing that description word of mouth to your job description and seeing what you're missing. Because there may be ways or phrases that they're using that you're like, hey, that's a great way to describe this. Let's update the job description. And vice versa. They may be saying things you're like, actually, that's not a good way to describe what we do. And that may lead the wrong people to apply for these roles. So I think that's worth checking out. All right. So this is episode 2 of season 24. We got a lot more great conversations in store. Stay tuned next week, and we're going to be talking about onboarding and orientation. It's going to be a lot of fun. But until then, like we remind you all the time here at Beyond Clean, keep fighting dirty.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.